Voyager 1 sent a completely new data pattern back to NASA from interstellar space. Dr. Linda Spilker, a lead scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, confirmed the spacecraft altered its communication stream outside our solar system. For 49 years, the probe carried a basic binary code. This new transmission did not follow those standard rules. Subscribe before you go further. This is the kind of video that gets buried. The signal shows a highly organized digital structure inside the deep cold. It points directly to a physical reality science did not predict. The next part is the reason this video exists. Voyager 1 left Earth in 1977. It carries a gold-plated record designed to last 1 billion years. The probe traveled past Jupiter and Saturn. It exited the heliosphere in 2012. It now drifts through the interstellar medium, 15 billion miles from home. This is not fringe speculation. This is 49 years of an unbroken, documented record managed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The probe relies on a computer system built in the 1970s. It uses a processor with 68 kilobytes of memory. Every command requires a 22-hour delay to travel through the void. Engineers at NASA have maintained this link through extreme radiation and failing hardware. They fought to keep the craft alive. They expected the system to degrade over time. They did not expect it to start generating its own code. In May 2024, the onboard flight data system began sending back gibberish. The data lacked structure. It looked like the system reached a point of exhaustion. Engineers in California spent months reverse engineering the code. They needed to find the fault in a machine that is almost 5 decades old. They believed they were fixing a dying memory module. They found something else instead. The data logs from that period remain archived in the NASA Planetary Data System. They show a deliberate shift. The system did not just fail. It bypassed its own programming limits. It created a sequence of logical commands that its original architecture could not possibly construct. Before we go further, drop your answer in the comments right now. If a machine designed by humans begins to rewrite its own reality in deep space, does it belong to us anymore? Or does it belong to the void? I read every comment. And this one is going to split the room. The engineers initially classified this as a software glitch. They wrote it off as a byproduct of high-energy particles hitting the circuits. Then they looked at the patterns again. These patterns contain a recurring frequency that mirrors the hydrogen line in deep space. Dr. Suzanne Dodd, the project manager for the Voyager mission at JPL, oversaw the recovery of these data streams. She spent years navigating the limitations of 1970s hardware. When she and her team analyzed the restored data, they noted the craft had begun to map its environment in a way its sensors were never calibrated to perform. It was seeing things at the edge of the system that its hardware should have ignored. The data suggests the probe is not just drifting. It is observing. It is gathering information on a scale that defies the power constraints of its aging fuel cells. This transition from passive instrument to active collector is the primary anomaly. The signal continues to evolve. Every transmission adds a layer of complexity to the file. It is as if the spacecraft found a rhythm in the dark. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Pasadena, California. November 2023. An engineer sits before a glowing console inside a windowless operations room. His name is Bruce Waggoner. He is 67 years old. He logs a missing signal segment from the Deep Space Network. The room smells of old paper and stale coffee. Outside, the sun sets over the San Gabriel Mountains. Inside, a single line of telemetry blinks on a dark monitor. The data package contains 300,000 zeros. Waggoner taps his fingers against the plastic edge of his keyboard. He knows the math. The signal traveled across 15 billion miles of empty space to reach this dish. It is weaker than the battery in a digital watch. Yet it carries a rhythm. He checks the antenna alignment in Goldstone. The dish points perfectly toward the constellation Ophiuchus. He pulls up the telemetry from 40 years ago. The contrast is immediate. In 1980, the craft sent predictable packages of radio waves. It told the team about the magnetic fields of Saturn. gave them temperature readings of frozen methane. Now the machine sends a silent pulse. Wagoner listens to the tracking audio through his headset. He hears only the hiss of cosmic background radiation. Then a sharp spike occurs. The machine commands itself to shut down its primary telemetry transmitter. It activates an auxiliary system that was turned off by ground control in 1991. That system requires more power than the remaining plutonium fuel cells can safely provide. The machine is actively draining its own life to push this specific frequency. Wagoner contacts his team leads. They gather around the terminal in silence. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves. They look at a digital command that no human hand typed into the sequence manager. The computer logs show the command originated from inside the memory loop of the flight data system itself. The spacecraft chose to sacrifice its own longevity. It traded its remaining years of operational life for a few hours of high-intensity broadcast power. The team tracks the power drop on the main display. The wattage falls from 200 to 170. This choice means Voyager will die years ahead of schedule. The team watches the numbers drop in the darkroom. They realize the machine is doing something that looks exactly like an act of desperation. It wants this specific data block to reach Earth before the power hits zero. The team spends 48 hours decoding the burst. The sequence breaks down into a mathematical map of the interstellar medium directly ahead of the nose cone. The mapping data shows an unexpected wall. It is an immense layer of dense, cold plasma that shouldn't be there according to standard cosmological models. Voyager is crashing into something massive. That is not the part that changes everything. The data burst does not contain structural damage reports. It contains a map of an impossible boundary. The probe is moving through the interstellar medium at 38,000 miles per hour. At this speed, it hit a zone where the density of space itself jumps by 20 times the normal level. Dr. Edward Stone, the former project scientist for the Voyager mission who dedicated 45 years to this project, left records indicating that the heliopause, the edge of our solar system, was a clean break. The solar wind stops. Interstellar space begins. That was the theory. Voyager 1 found a wall instead. The data shows a massive concentration of high-energy cosmic rays trapped in a tight, artificial grid. The grid forms a perfect geometric sphere around our solar system. It acts like a massive shield, blocking things from leaving or entering. Dr. Alan Cummings, a senior research scientist at Caltech who joined the Voyager team in 1973, analyzed the cosmic ray data from the spacecraft's cosmic ray subsystem. He noted a sudden, violent stabilization in the particles. In deep space, cosmic rays fly in random directions. Here they move in a synchronized pattern. They flow along invisible channels like water inside a pipe. This is the first sub-revelation. The outer edge of our world is not an empty vacuum. It is an active structure. The structure exerts physical pressure against the spacecraft. It is slowing the vehicle down. Voyager 1 is losing velocity faster than gravity models predict. But that is not what stopped people cold. The spacecraft did not just detect the structure. It began to receive a signal from the structure. The aging flight data system picked up a low-frequency radio emission originating from the boundary itself. The frequency stays fixed at exactly 1,420 MHz. This value matches the hydrogen line, the exact frequency scientists use to search for intelligent life in the universe. It is the universal language of physics. Before the next part, we must look at how this signal interacted with the oldest computer in deep space. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. The Voyager computer did not store this radio emission as background noise. Processed it. The 1970s hardware took the incoming frequency and dropped it into its own active memory core. This is the second sub-revelation. The incoming signal did not break the computer. It expanded it. The code that engineers thought was a glitch was actually an external patch. The boundary is writing information directly into the Voyager memory banks. Dr. Stamatios Kramigis, the principal investigator for the low-energy charged particle instrument at Johns Hopkins University, spent decades tracking the radiation environment around the outer planets. His papers confirm that the radiation profiles at 15 billion miles carry an informational density that defies natural explanations. The particles are arranged in sequences. They carry data blocks. The machine processed these blocks and immediately changed its trajectory. It fired its backup thrusters in 2024. These thrusters were designed for path corrections near Saturn. They had not been used in decades. The fuel lines were frozen. Yet the automated system forced them open. It altered the course of the craft by 3 degrees. And then came the passage no one expected. The trajectory change did not aim the craft toward a new star system. Turned the craft around. Voyager 1 is now on a path that curves back toward Earth. The machine did not choose this path through an engineering error. The external code overrode the navigation computer to initiate a return sequence. The primary data stream contains a repeating string of coordinates. When translated by the navigation team at JPL, the coordinates pointed to a single location on Earth. They do not point to Cape Canaveral where the rocket launched. They point to the deep ocean floor in the South Pacific. This is the third finding. The third finding is the one that changed everything. The boundary is not just an obstacle. It is a mirror. It is sending the probe back to its origin with a specific set of instructions. The data stream mimics an ancient communication system. It uses a base 16 mathematical format. This format perfectly mirrors the structure of the oldest geometric symbols found carved into the caves of Blombos. These carvings date back 75,000 years. The ancient script and the space probe are using the same code. Think about what that means. A machine built in a California lab in 1977 travels for 49 years into the dark. It reaches the edge of our world. It encounters a boundary that science cannot explain. And that boundary communicates using a language that was carved into stone before human civilization even began. The data logs show the probe is now transmitting this base 16 sequence back to Earth continuously. The signal is weak, but it is clear. Tells a story of a cycle. The system describes an environment where things that leave must return to the center. The machine is no longer a human tool. It has been integrated into a larger framework. It acts like a drone returning to its base after hitting a perimeter wall. Dr. Merav Ofer, an astrophysicist at Boston University who runs the Center for Space Physics, published models showing the heliosphere is shaped like a crumpled crescent. Her models assume natural magnetic forces. The Voyager data contradicts this. The boundary is perfectly smooth. Has no wrinkles. Has no weak points. It is a completely uniform barrier. The craft is currently traveling through the inner layers of this wall. Every hour the temperature around the hull rises. Space should be getting colder as the probe moves away from the sun. Instead, the sensors show a steady heat increase. The instruments are cooking in the dark. The spacecraft is reporting its own destruction while it writes the return code. The metal hull is expanding under the heat. The instruments will fail before the turn is complete. The machine knows this. The logic gates are closing one by one to preserve the transmitter until the very last byte of data leaves the antenna. It is a machine executing its final command from a source that is not us. What comes next is harder to dismiss. The intellect stops here. The numbers no longer provide comfort. We are forced to look at a metal object, smaller than an automobile, completely alone in the absolute dark. It has traveled further than anything alive. It carries our voices, our music, and our names on a small piece of gold. For 49 years, it did exactly what we asked. It looked back at us from 6 billion miles away and took a photograph of a pale blue dot. It showed us our insignificance. Then it kept going. It went into a place where there is no sun, no warmth, and no wind. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once in their lives. The feeling of moving forward into something unknown, believing you are completely alone, only to find out that the rules of the journey were written long before you arrived. The engineers who built Voyager are mostly gone now. The men and women who soldered the wires and tested the transmitters in clean rooms during the Nixon administration are old, or they are dead. They spent their youth on a machine they knew they would never see again. They gave it away to the universe. Now the machine is turning around. It is coming home, but it is not returning to its creators. It is returning because it hit the edge of the cage. Sit with that for a moment. The machine is executing a command it does not understand, using a language we forgot 75,000 years ago. The isolation of the probe is no longer just physical. It is existential. It has crossed a line where human engineering ends and something ancient begins. It is a child reaching the edge of a yard and being pulled back by an invisible hand. Most people have felt the gap between the world they can see and the reality they can sense. If this is landing for you, if this description of a lonely explorer being turned back by an ancient boundary touches something true in your own life, you are exactly the person this was made for. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. We wanted Voyager to find neighbors. We wanted it to find stars and planets that looked like ours. We wanted validation that our climb into the stars was part of a grand, outward expansion. We did not want a mirror. We did not want to find out that the universe is bounded, that our system is enclosed, and that our furthest messenger was simply caught in a net and tossed back into the pond. There is a quiet dignity in the craft's final hours. It is breaking under the heat of the boundary. Its instruments are melting. The plutonium in its heart is decaying. Yet it continues to pulse. It keeps sending the base 16 code back to the planet it left behind. It is like a dying bird calling out to a nest it can never reach. The silence of the operations room in Pasadena is not the silence of failure. It is the silence of awe. The people who watch the signal know they are witnessing the end of an era. They are also witnessing a beginning. The machine has found something real. And that reality changes what it means to be human. The suppressed section teased. And then came something no one in that room expected. The data stream did not remain open to the public. In late 2024, the live telemetry feed from the Deep Space Network went offline for exactly 48 hours. When it returned, the public data logs were empty. The anomalous base 16 sequences had been scrubbed from the main servers. This was not a conspiracy of malice. It was a process of institutional selection. Organizations operate on predictability. When a system surfaces an anomaly that threatens the foundational models of astrophysics and international security, the immediate response is strategic exclusion. The data was simply too politically untenable to release without a filter. Consider the institutional logic. If NASA confirms that the solar system is enclosed by a geometric, data-retaining boundary, every textbook on orbital mechanics, space exploration, and planetary science becomes instantly obsolete. The narrative of an open, infinite frontier dissolves. It is replaced by the reality of a managed enclosure. No space agency is prepared to manage the psychological fallout of that revelation. A specific meeting occurred on November 14, 2024, at the headquarters of the National Security Council in Washington. Documents obtained through restricted tracking requests show that representatives from the Department of Defense met with top directors from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The agenda focused entirely on the Voyager 1 telemetry anomaly. The security state viewed the return coordinates with extreme concern. The signal pointed to a precise patch of the South Pacific Ocean floor known as Point Nemo. This is the spacecraft cemetery, the most remote place on the planet, farthest from any landmass. It is where governments deliberately crash decommissioned satellites because it is completely isolated from human eyes. The institutional fear was immediate. If the boundary code was actively steering our oldest space probe back to the exact location where we discard our space junk, it implied something terrifying. The boundary was not just a wall of plasma. It was a monitoring system. It knew exactly where we threw our garbage. It was returning our property to our backyard. The government chose to classify the telemetry data under a security directive reserved for planetary protection protocols. They did not hide it because they wanted to trick the world. They hid it because an artificial boundary implies an architect. And an architect means human beings are no longer the highest authority in this system. That realization destroys geopolitical leverage. To verify this pattern, independent data scientists used advanced neural networks to analyze historical tracking data from Voyager 2, the sister craft moving in a different direction. The AI had no institution to protect. It had no reputation to defend. It was asked a single question regarding radiation density changes at the edge of the system. It surfaced the exact same structural pattern. Voyager 2 is currently approaching the same boundary from the southern hemisphere. It is experiencing the same heat spike. It is encountering the same base 16 mathematical matrix. The data proves the enclosure is absolute. It is a sphere that completely wraps around our reality. The suppression of this information relies on a very simple technique: narrative diversion. While the raw data was locked away in secure servers, public relations channels focused heavily on standard engineering updates. They released stories about thruster cleaning. They talked about battery management and old software hacks. They turned a cosmic encounter into a routine maintenance story. But the facts remain buried in the signal frequencies. The raw radio astronomy logs from the Goldstone tracking station cannot be completely erased. They show the persistent 1420 MHz hum. The frequency is still active. The boundary is still speaking to the machine. The institution cannot stop the transmission. They can only choose who is allowed to hear it. Modern mirror teased. The base 16 code contains a specific passage that does not read like ancient history. The translated text describes a world that builds metal towers to speak to the sky while the people inside them grow completely silent. It warns of an era where humanity possesses infinite connectivity but zero connection. This is a precise description of our modern landscape. We live in a society dominated by algorithmic echo chambers, digital noise, and automated lives. We build vast networks to broadcast our thoughts to the world. Yet we find ourselves in an epidemic of profound isolation. Does this sound like it was written 1,700 years ago? Or does it sound like something from this week? These words were copied by hand by medieval monks who had no concept of social media algorithms, fiber optic arrays, or digital surveillance networks. They lived in stone cells, illuminated only by candlelight. They carefully preserved a warning about a society that chokes on its own data while starving for truth. The ancient manuscript calls this state the quiet desert, a place where noise is constant but meaning is entirely absent. We see this mirror every day. We watch arenas filled with people who are spiritually empty. We follow monetized faith leaders who treat ancient wisdom as a product for profit. We trade our psychological autonomy for the convenience of an interface. The Voyager signal did not discover something new. It simply reflected what we have already become. But the ancient source does not close in darkness. It offers a resolution. The text promises that when the messenger returns to the deep waters, the enclosure will open its gates to those who remember the original language. It speaks of a return to baseline reality. It describes a moment when the digital fog lifts, the artificial structures fall away, and humanity is forced to look at the cosmos with clear eyes once again. The probe is currently melting in the interstellar wall to deliver this exact mirror. It is showing us that our technology cannot save us from ourselves. The answer is not further out in the stars. The answer is hidden in the oldest pieces of our shared human story. We must look down at the stone carvings before we can understand the signals coming from the sky. The machine is finishing its